Hey everybody, welcome back to Books, Universe, and Everything. I'm Ryan Boucher. I'm your host for this month's book, and unfortunately the book that we had planned, The Rune Lords, it's over here, it got rescheduled. So we're going to do this one next month. You are here for The Invisible Life of ADDIE LARUE. That's us. Hope that everybody's having a good month so far, and hope that we get to talk about a lot of interesting writing in this book. This is one of the more interesting books that came out in the last little while. This one came out in 2014, and so I think that also makes this the most recent book that we've done on the podcast. I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's the most recent one that we've talked about. So let's start with some introductions, and then we're going to dive in. Allison, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Katie and Matthew. Tell us who you are, what you write, and where we can find you too. Also, everybody, if you want to find these great authors, there are links in the comments, not the links in the comments, links in the description to all of their websites and stuff too. So check them out for sure. We'll start with Allison. Go ahead. Hang on one second, Allison. I don't think we're getting you. One second, sorry.
Do I need to put the mic in my nose again?
No, it's my fault. Okay, go ahead now.
Okay, redo. I am Allison Anderson. I'm the author of the Cartographer's War Books, which is a YA fantasy based on Greek mythology. I'm also the author of Children of Ash series, which the first book comes out October 7th, and I'm really, really excited about that. You can find me at AllisonAndersonAuthor.com and everywhere on social media.
Thanks. Take it away, Katie.
So my name's Katie, or Cam Davidson. I'm the author of the Syrian series. It is a romantasy series. The 4 books are about, well, 3 books are out, working on the 4th. And then I do have another series coming out called The Andromedan Zoology. First book is coming out in December. So same, really excited about this one. But you can find me most social media. It's Cam Davidson Books or camdavidson.com.
Awesome. And Matthew, you have a book that just came out today.
Yes, just released today. I'm Matthew Bockholt, and my first book I just published in April, Bloom, and it is a young adult kind of paranormal romance. And then the sequel just came out today, Wither. So I'm excited for that.
Oh, it's so awesome.
And you can find those. I'm actually only published on fablevine.com. So that's where you can find those.
Yeah, congratulations, and please check it out. I got to be a beta reader on Bloom a little bit. I don't know that I gave too much feedback like you wanted me to, but
all feedback is useful.
And excited to check out Wither now as well. Nice titles too. All right, so let's dive into V.E. Schwab's Invisible Life of ADDIE LARUE. Now, I knew in inviting, this was kind of a last-minute change that we did, and I emailed all 3 of you early on in this month and asked you to please participate. I knew that Allison and Katie both had read the book before because of what you had told me, and I knew that you both loved it. I took a shot on Matthew because he does YA romance, and I enjoyed Bloom. I thought he might enjoy the book as well. But I heard, Matthew, that you had some problems with it, and
Yes.
we'll dive into that too. So it'll be great. Okay, let me bring up my questions. Let's start with just the idea of the book. This is an interesting book. It's a contemporary. Oh, sorry. I usually read the description first. Let me do that so people know. If you haven't read this, we are going to be talking about spoilers. So get ready for that. I hope you don't mind. But this book is more than 10 years old now. So sorry. That's how it goes sometimes. Here is what the inside cover says. Never pray to the gods that answer after dark. France, 1714, in a moment of desperation, a young woman named Adeline meets a dangerous stranger and makes a terrible mistake. As she realizes the limitations of her Faustian bargain, being able to live forever without being able to be remembered by anyone she sees, Addie chooses to flee her small village as everything she once held dear is torn away. But there are still dreams to be had and a life to live, and she is determined to find excitement and satisfaction in the wide beckoning world, even if she will be doomed to be alone forever. Or not quite alone, as every year on her birthday the alluring Luke comes to visit, checking to see if she is ready to give up her soul. Their darkly thrilling game stretches through the ages, seeing Addie witness history and fight to regain herself as she crosses oceans and tries on various lives. It will be 300 years before she stumbles into a hidden bookstore and discovers someone who can remember her name, and suddenly everything changes again. So the basic plot of the book is that Addie makes like it says in there, a Faustian deal with a devil-like god for her soul, and he twists her request from just helping to be free and to be away from her village, and that it turns into that no one can remember who she is after they stop talking to her, after they stop looking at her. They immediately forget who she is. So she loses everything. She loses her family. She loses her identity, basically. And she has to figure out how to survive and live when every time somebody leaves the room, they immediately forget who she is, which is kind of an interesting premise. As the book goes along, we bounce back and forth between the ages of her going through what she did early on into modern day 2014 New York City, where she has ended up. And she, like it says in there, leaves you on a cliffhanger, but she finally runs into someone who can remember who she is, and then finds out that he's got his own problems and his own curse as well, and that's why that they ended up together. Let's talk about curses just to start this off. So Addie has a curse. She is not able to be remembered. These kind of curses and stuff, in this case, it's kind of like a genie-like bargain that she makes. Have you ever written anything like that where it's a good way to take a main character and just plunge them into trouble, I think. What do you think about the bargain that she made and how that came about? And then have you ever had or tried to write something like that? Let's start with Katie on this one. What do you think?
For me, I think it was one of my favorite curse reads that I stumbled upon. I feel like a lot follow a lot of the same themes, and they're super easy to break. Eventually they find a way to break it and it's broken. So I liked how this ended because tech shouldn't really break it. So I loved how this curse was written, and I have never written direct curses like that where there's a conversation and there's a sort of genie exchange. I've tried maybe more vague curses where it just seems like this person keeps living a certain problem in their life or running into the same problem over and over again, or almost like I have an immortal character who, in a way, it is a similar curse in that she loses people because she continues to just live and they all die. So it is kind of a way she does view it as a curse in her book, but no one did it to her. So I think, that's the closest I've ever gotten to writing a curse.
Yeah, this is one of the times when it reminded me, I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and there's a lot of times when the players will ask for something, and as a dungeon master, I'll find ways to twist that around and not exactly give them what they're looking for. That's kind of what happens here too.
Yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah. Matthew, what do you think about Henry's curse? Henry is cursed that everybody will love him and see exactly what they want in him, and he finds out that that's not really up to what he likes.
Yeah, so I actually have to come clean a little bit about something to start off.
Yeah.
So I'd never heard of this book until Ryan
Yeah,
reached out
let's
to
talk about
me
this too.
and asked me to read it for B2E, and I was like, sure, I'd love to be on B2E. And I read the synopsis, and it sounds amazing. Like, this is a fantastic premise. The only problem with it was, oh no, I have this idea too. This is actually a character in my third book that I'm currently working on, the same one in the series that I just told you guys about.
Yeah.
I have a character who has the same, it's not a curse for her, it's like a supernatural ability. But yeah, people cannot remember her as soon as she has left their mind, they forget everything they know about her. And so it's the exact same kind of concept. And so I was like, oh no, someone's already written this. Well, that's interesting. So this would be fun to read, I thought. But the other thing that I realized once I got to Henry, the other part of this character's supernatural abilities that people also naturally like her and trust her. So even though they don't know who she is, they have a sense that they do know who she is and that they automatically like and trust her until she's out of sight, and then they forget all about her and can't remember, And so every time it's meeting someone, it's kind of like both characters put into one. So that was really interesting for me to have
Shoot.
that weird coincidence reading this book.
Famously,
But at the same time, yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
keep
What was
going.
that?
I was just gonna. I have something to hopefully help you out with this a little bit, but go ahead. How did you feel about it?
Oh, well. So obviously, I really enjoy the premise. It's a really neat premise. I like the idea, and let's see. Your question was specifically about Henry's, right? And how that doesn't really work out for him. And it's true, and that kind of happens with my character, whose name also, by coincidence, is one of the names that ADDIE LaRue uses. Right at the beginning, it says that one of the names she used in the past was L, and that's my character's name. I was like, what is happening right now? So if anyone out there is ever wondering if you have a completely unique idea, I don't think there is such a thing. There are original ideas, but not unique ones. So if you've thought of it, someone else has probably thought of it too. Just keep that in mind. But yeah, she definitely uses this to her advantage, in my book, the way Henry kind of does in this book, where, he just knows people will treat him well everywhere he goes, but at the same time, he's got a sense of, I guess for lack of a better term, a sense of morality that makes him hesitant to use it. And so it almost kind of ends up being something that holds him back from getting out and enjoying life because feels like he's using all these people.
Yeah, I like Henry a lot. That's a good point. I like it that he has that moral compass. That's not what he wants. He doesn't want people to like him. He wants people to like him for him, not for what they want to just see in him. And that would be really frustrating, sure. Just to assuage you a little bit, Dan Wells famously talks about how when he was writing I Am Not a Serial Killer and was about to be published, his editor called him up and said, "Hey, have you heard about this book Dexter?" And and Dan said, "No, I haven't heard about this book named Dexter." And he went and looked at it and found that the main character is a person who fights with psychotic tendencies to not be a serial killer, but is constantly, battling that and everything. And
Right.
Dan had to just lean into that and realize that book was coming out. I think it was just before or just after his was also slated to come out. And so those things happen a lot. I was also talking to my friend Ethan, who's been on the podcast before. He sent me a story from, I was just bringing this up, Aldous Budrys. And this was back in, I don't have the year on here. This was a long time ago. But it's a story called Nobody Bothers Gus, about a guy who also makes a deal, who or not makes a deal, he is some kind of alien, but has the ability to not be remembered by people and gets ignored. And in this story, they're building this big freeway and they build it around his house or something like that. And it's so because they can't, conceptualize him. And so, like you said, I like what you said. There are no unique ideas, but there are original ideas. And I think that's important, that you have an original take on all sorts of stuff. Allison, you deal with people who who are stuck in situations that they don't necessarily want to be in your books. How do you go about that? And what did you think about Addie and Henry and their situations? And how did that help with their characterization, I think? Does that help
Well,
us
it
as
gives
reader
it
a
such
lot?
a nice balance, right? Like instant tension with you have this curse. You prayed for this blessing and you get it. You get what you want, but it comes with this curse. And so there's just instant tension in regards to that, which is a huge piece of book writing, right? Is like the soonest that you can initiate tension in a story, like the better, right? And it's so interesting because Addie and Henry come from such different worlds, right? I mean, Henry's from the 21st century and Addie is not. Addie's from the, what is it, 1700s? And so, one, like their perspectives on life are so different, but even their perspective on their curses is is way different than each other's, right? And so I think that that creates a really, really cool element that goes along with the story because we're getting pieces of the story from the past and the present, right? Um, but it's so interesting to also see their points of view. Like you said, like they're put into this situation, right? And how do they get out of it, right? And it's so interesting. I love character psychology. Like it is one of my favorite things when you're developing a character, when you're putting them in weird situations because each character is going to react to things differently, right? And where Addie kind of comes to her curse with this, it's almost like this like begrudging acceptance, right? She's just like, this is just my life. This is what I do. I can't do anything about it. I'm just going to keep going. And of course, she has this like animosity towards Luke the whole time, right? It's like you did this to me, and so we're not going to be friends. Whereas Henry almost comes with it as like this is my like and his curse is different than Addie's, right? He only has a year to live. And so he kind of comes at his curse whereas she's immortal.
Right.
So he comes at it with this mentality of like I only have enough time, like only this amount of time to use it. And so while he does have this like bitterness about not being loved for who he still is able to give people joy in his curse, right? And so, and he uses it. We see it when he goes to I think it was a barista, and she was like, "You look just like my son, who's dead," right? And he sits with her. He doesn't go, "Oh, you're crazy. Like, don't talk to me." Whereas some people with that curse would, right? They would be like, "Oh, okay, that's great," and leave. But he sits there and he talks with her, and so it's really interesting to see their characters use their curses as well as their blessings, and it creates this really cool dynamic for both of them, which I think is part of what makes these characters memorable and part of what makes the story work.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did that answer your question,
Yeah, I
Ryan?
think so. I mean, this is a big part of the story is the curse, and a big part of their character is how they both deal with their curses and stuff. Let's do before we get into the writing and stuff like that. Let's do just recommendations, and we'll do this off the bat because I haven't had one. We did a couple of months ago. Aaron read the Crystal Shard and wasn't very impressed with it. And in fact, he messaged me a couple times during the month and said, "I don't know, I don't really like this book, but I'll keep talking about it." And I'm like, "That's great. I love it when those differences happen." But if you could each tell me what your favorite part of the book was, and Matthew, if you could tell me what was your least favorite part of it, that's okay too. Katie, what was your favorite part of the book?
I think especially with books like this, I love the endings. Like I do love, like I'm a big bittersweet or even like not happy ending person as much as I'm like, I'm going to be devastated. Like I enjoy it because if I feel the pain and I feel the emotions, I'm like, this got me and this is a good book then because I was able to connect to the character. So I did really enjoy how the ending went. I just thought after all this time, she finally got a little savvy here. And like got more determination in her. So I did enjoy that part.
The ending is what actually sealed it for me too on this book. Is that
Mm-hmm.
I do like books that are strong enough to not do the happy get everything ending. And I thought That's what I was reading. I thought I was reading a book where she would find a way out of it, and she would win, and her and Henry would live happily ever after. But spoilers, they don't. She does get some of what she wants, but she has to give up some too, and that's a good. I thought it was a good ending. Matthew, what's something that you didn't like about the book?
Am I allowed to also say the ending?
Sure, absolutely. That when I was
That's funny.
researching topics about what to talk about, that was what was most divisive among people about this book. So go ahead.
Well, it's actually not the ending, although I'm just going to be honest. I had troubles with like every single chapter and almost every single scene. So I may be the wrong person to ask. It didn't feel like a story to me. It felt more like and I realize it's probably intentionally meant to feel more like a memoir, but there was just, for me, there was no tension. So I thought that was interesting when Allison brought that up, because like everything was kind of spoiled ahead of time. In fact, it does this constantly. Almost every chapter, it seems like Addie gets into a situation, but then the author steps in to say, don't worry, she figures it out eventually, or do this happens or that happens at this different time. And it seemed like the author was just constantly interrupting the story to remind us that it's just a story and that everything's going to work out. And of course, we were to know that because of the time flops are constantly going back and forth. And so it was very difficult for me to find anything, honestly, to enjoy about the actual story. Now, if you want me to say something good about it, it would be the prose. Like the prose is magnificent. I would say that V.E. Schwab is a master at prose. But as far as the actual storytelling, I couldn't find anything that I enjoyed about it. And for me, the ending was rather disappointing, not because it's not a perfect ending. I don't mind that at all. My first book is called Bloom, and my second book is called Wither. And that's a little bit of a giveaway there, but it may not have a terribly happy ending, right? And so I don't have a problem with unhappy endings. My problem was that when she made this deal with Luke, who has been very, savvy up to this point about being very careful with the words they use and using it to his maximum advantage. And I went and looked at the words she used and like, oh no, she's in trouble. Like she did not ask for much at all, and she put everything on the line, and he threw himself right into that deal and said, sure, let's do this. And I expected it to turn out very badly for her. But I guess the devil was also a little too smitten with Addie, and so didn't take advantage of it the way he could have.
Yeah. Okay. There are a couple things in what you were talking about that I do want to come up to later. We're going to talk about the time jumps in this story and the foreshadowing that kind of happens. And what was the last part you were talking about? Oh, we're going to talk a little about love triangles in this too. And so that'll be interesting. Allison, what was it that you love about this book? Because I know you love this book.
I do like this book. I am a huge V. Schwab fan. Like you said, Matthew, like the prose, she is an artist with her words. And I don't know how she does it. I've read almost everything that she's written. And it's so interesting because V. Schwab doesn't stick to one genre. She's written fantasy trilogies. She's written superhero novels. She's done dystopian. She's done monsters. She will do anything and everything. And so what I found really cool about this book was it's a contemporary romance novel with speculative elements.
With fantasy yeah.
With fantasy stuff in it, which I thought was really, really interesting because it gave it almost a sense of whimsy. Because you can read a romance book and they're almost cookie cutter style, right? It's you know that it fit that 50% mark on your Kindle that they are going to kiss. Like there is a format for romances, right? And Addie hits all of those. She hits all the romance things. But what made it kind of exciting was it kind of the speculative side of it kind of spun it on its head, and it gave you this new point of view into life. Because you can talk about a girl who lives in New York that nobody remembers and write a contemporary about that, right? Like how many stories have we read where, it's the girl that lives in a giant city that everybody just kind of like uses as a doormat, right? Like you can read that over and over and over again. But this element of this curse and this magic just tweaks it just enough to make it a little bit magical. And like the fact that it kind of gives Addie permission to bond with Henry, makes it really cool. And so it makes New York City, that's already this huge magical thing in a lot of our eyes, right? Like when you hear the words New York City, you think of lights and magic and, fireworks. But Addie shows us these hidden gems in New York through her curse and gets to show Henry as she goes. And so it just makes it just a little bit more magical. And I really like books where it takes our world, and it's not like there's a lot of urban fantasy, right, where it's set in our world, but it's like, oh, there's dragons and there's monsters, and it's like paranormal stuff too that does that. But I really love when an author can take our world and tweak it just enough to just give it that filter that makes it just a little bit more magical. And so I think that is probably my favorite part about this book, is that it takes our world and just adds enough for you to be like, I could live in that world. I could do that. I can feel that magic,
Well, let's talk about the prose a little bit on this, and let's dive into the writing. I liked what you said, though, that this is a contemporary. Yeah.
Right. I just want to say something real quick, because I don't want to be the downer here. I just want to say that one thing I want the audience and others to take away from the fact that I didn't enjoy this book isn't that it's a bad book that you shouldn't enjoy either. What I want you to take away from it is that, on Goodreads, this has like 1.5 million reviews and it's got 4.5 stars. Okay. So just because a lot of people like something doesn't mean you have to like it. So that's one positive takeaway, that you can feel comfortable saying, you know what, I don't have to like something just because everyone else does. And the other thing to take away is, as a writer, just because some people really don't like your work doesn't mean it doesn't have potential and won't speak to a lot of people, and there won't be a horde of people that love it. Okay, so that's the positive takeaways from the fact that I didn't like this book. So I just wanted to get that out of the way before we move on.
No, I appreciate that. That's exactly right. There are people that are not going to like this book, and there's nothing that V.E. Schwab could do except for pay them a bunch of money to say that they like the book. There are some people that just won't like it. There's some people that aren't going to like stuff that we write, and that's fine too.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely. Let's talk about the writing now. So we're going to dive into this. This is a podcast for authors, or by authors for writers. Let's talk about the writing. So let's start with the prose. We were talking about that earlier. The prose is very fantasy, and anybody can answer this. As Allison said, though, there's only like one fantasy element in this book, though. Otherwise, it's just a contemporary romance. So how is that fit? Is it too flowery? Is it good? Like what? I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? I think Matthew mentioned the prose too earlier, and I think we all appreciated how good she is at turning a phrase and putting things together. Why does it work? Why doesn't it work?
I think V.E. Schwab has fully embraced the learn all the rules so you know how to break them element in writing. Right. I remember when I first started writing that was like a phrase I heard a lot, because authors, like we were talking about having original versus unique ideas. Right. And authors, we come like early authors. I remember doing this so bad. We come into writing thinking that we are going to create something new, and we are going to create something completely revolutionary. And that's just not how it works most of the time. I feel like there's a couple of authors throughout we have Shakespeare. We've got Shakespeare, who totally came in and revolutionized writing, right? And storytelling, right? And it'll happen again. It's going to happen again. But for the most part, there are set boundaries for how to tell a story. And I feel like V.E. Schwab, specifically in this book, taking different tropes and different formats of writing and just tweaking them just enough. She knew what the rules were. She knows how to turn a phrase, knows how to keep an audience engaged, and she just was able to twist it just enough that it didn't quite break, but it's not normal, right? And so I feel like that is something that she and even in her other books and things, that's something that she's done really well, is that she knows what the rules are, and so she knows where the breaking points are and where to bend them. And so
I like that. That's a good point. There are a lot of incomplete sentences in this book, but they fit
Hmm.
perfectly with what she's doing. There's a lot of repetition, but it doesn't feel like she's going on and on about something when she says it three different ways.
Yeah.
What do you think, Katie? You were nodding along there too.
Yeah, because I think for me, any books that have ever been like my top reads, my top favorites, like of course I'm gonna binge read like, From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Best writing out there? No. But it's one of those guilty pleasures. It's like I don't know what it is, the characters. It's something in there, but like my top favorite books of all time always seem to have that lyrical prose. And I think it does help with that kind of how you were saying before. She adds just enough into the world, in our world, to make it a little bit fantasy-esque. And I think the fact that you add that lyricalness to it, because we so often associate rhythm and rhyme and lyrical with fantasy or storytelling, or the Christian Hans Andersen Grimm brothers, you associate it with that fantasy, that I think it naturally is like you can just add a little bit, but it makes it feel enough fantasy. And I think it does help what she's doing there in trying to keep it real, but also add just a little bit more to kind of have that image in your head. Um, I think where it can hinder readers is for those who don't enjoy that style. I've run into so many people, because I think another lyrical author is Leigh Bardugo. She writes very similar, and I know a lot of people that I've met that might not be as familiar with V. Schwab, but are with her, that don't like her books outside of Shadow and Bone and the Grishaverse. They don't like any of her other books because of the lyricalness of it. So I think sometimes that can hinder a reader, because it's just not how they like to consume a story. And that way they like to have it just very blunt, forward. This is how it is.
Yeah, I never thought that I was reading anything but a fantasy book just because of the way that things were written, even though the setting is all
Mhm.
what it is. And like I said, there's no magic, but you're right. It puts it in that genre. Just her writing does. I like that. And you're right. It could be off-putting for some people too. That it's not everybody's cup of tea. So, Matthew, you do a writing group where you have different writing prompts and different rules and stuff that everybody has to stick to every week. What do you think as you go through it? I know you practice it a lot. What do you think about the prose and about the writing in general, and as far as just the words and everything that she chooses?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add other than what Allison and Katie already said. It's beautiful prose, like just sentence to sentence, everything flows. It's all understandable, even when she's going into these kind of like uh, almost bizarre ways of describing things and stuff. But it's always, like they said, poetic. It's interesting. It's a new way to think of things. I don't remember coming across any cliches, which is always nice. I appreciate that, and it's something I try to avoid in my own writing as well. And it's yeah, it makes it for an easy read. I think that that's probably the best thing that I can really say about this book, and something that I really admire. I've read a few other authors that I feel the same way about, where I'm like, wow, I wish I could write this good, as prose wise. It's really beautiful.
I read this book the first time, but to prep for this month, in my reread, I listened to it off Audible, and it is very fun to listen to too. If anybody enjoys somebody just kind of speaking really naturally but saying these great things, it's a fun one to listen to too. That's a good point. There aren't a lot
You
of
know, on
cliches.
that
Yeah.
Just on that note, when I started reading it, my wife got the audio version to listen to it along with me, and she said that she's like, just listening to it is amazing. Like, it's just because of I read it, but she listened to it, and she's like, the lyricalness of it, and the narrator does such a good job with it that it feels almost like listening to some epic poem kind of thing. And so I was like, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, it's really well done. Okay, there's something unique, not unique because there's nothing unique. We just talked about that, but something that stands out about this book are the time jumps, and there are other books that do this too. This one tends to do the thing where it foreshadows things in the present that then it will then promise to talk about in the past. And a couple chapters later, they'll jump back into the past and explain what it is or whatnot. as I was reading it this time, it reminded me that that's kind of like how a mystery novel works. So it's got kind of these elements of mystery in addition to fantasy romance. So the question here is, do these foreshadows work for you? Were they jarring? And why? This happens a lot in fantasy, especially in modernish fantasy written since the 2000s or so, that it's not just fantasy, but it's fantasy mixed with other genres in this case. So we have kind of like this mystery genre mixed in with a fantasy genre. Did these, let's start with this first part. Did these time jumps and the foreshadowing of things, it was always, oh, hey, we're going to learn why this thing burned down, or we're going to learn why she has this ring, but we don't know yet. But we'll learn in a couple chapters when we go back in time and get to see that kind of thing. How did that work for you? And what, if it didn't work, then what ways do you like to see it?
Boy. I'll start with this one so we can start with the negative, and then you guys can take away the positive end of it. For me, it really didn't work very well. There were very few instances where I even felt like it was something that I would even call foreshadowing. For the most part, it felt more like, I know this probably sounds like almost the same thing, but self-referential. Like it's referencing something that happened in the past. We just haven't seen what happened yet. And so it's not really foreshadowing. It's almost like backshadowing somehow a little bit. It's kind of weird. Like if it was told in order, then it would be foreshadowing, but it's not told in order. And for me, that didn't, I didn't like that. It just didn't sit well with me. And then the other thing where the one, like you bring up the ring, and that is one thing that is, constantly brought up and talked about. And there's this mystery surrounding it until we find out, a little more, even though she kind of gives away the details. So that I would consider a more traditional sort of foreshadowing. But at the same time, at the same time, it almost felt like a cheap trick because she's only not telling us so that the audience doesn't know. The character knows. The character knows what the ring is. The character knows why it means something to her. And she just keeps bringing it up, keeps thinking about it, but never in enough detail for us to know why to any serious degree. And then eventually she tells us. And so it felt just like this cheap. It felt cheap to me. I realize not everyone's going to feel that way, but it felt cheap to me because she was just keeping it a mystery for the sake of the audience, not for the sake of the characters. It was, yeah, I didn't like it.
All right.
And see, I want to sit down and ask, I want to sit down with her one day and be like, okay, why did you do it this way? Because authors, we learn about what's cliche and what's big no-nos, right? Whereas we read J.R.R. Tolkien, right? And we've got descriptions that are a mile long. Whereas nowadays it's like, oh no, you smuggle those in as best you can. And if you get caught, you're going to jail, right? You're going to author jail, right? And so what's curious is she has again, we're talking about psychology, right? But I'm talking about author psychology here. I wonder how much of her decision making was based on her character, because she has this character that came from the past and it lives in the present. And so of course there has to be flashbacks. But like Ryan was saying, she used the present to kind of foreshadow the past, which is backwards, because generally in writing, when you see flashbacks, they usually use it to foreshadow what's going to happen in the future. And so she flipped it. And so I really am interested. I would love to sit down with her and just be like, okay, why did you do that on purpose? Did you know that you were going to have all these flashbacks and you needed to tweak it just enough to keep it out of the no flashback zone? Or was it why did you do it that way? Because it's backwards. It's a little bit backwards, which can be jarring for people. And I am not a flashback reader. I don't love flashbacks in a book. Again, it's a new author no, right? You don't read very many of them. And oftentimes they can be really jarring because you're I want to know what's going on right now. But I liked that it did tie in and you wanted to know what happened in the past just as much as you wanted to know what happened in the present. And so I would be really interested to sit down with her one day and just be like, okay, what was the math? Because it's really a backwards way of doing it.
Yeah, I agree a lot with kind of what Allison said. I do love flashbacks. Like I like them a lot because I know like I'm gonna learn something here. Like that's important probably for the future. Obviously, like with this one, it was a little different where it was more like we learned the thing now and then why it was kind of what it is now, which is exactly how we learn history in real life. Things exist, and then we have to go back and learn why they exist the way they do. And I think that's like, for me, that's what felt very intentional, was like, this is how history works. You know, for a lot of people, especially like it's a little hard now with maybe like, you know, TV with internet, but like when you think of, you go to Greece and you see a preserved column and you're like, this column is here and it's preserved. And people that live there are looking at it maybe with like some sort of like adoration, but you have no idea why. And then you have to go back and learn why. Why is that column important? What happened on this column? Like a saint sacrificed themselves on this column. Like you learn, you're like, oh, so that's why it's important. It changes your view. I think that's what I love authors do, is when they present us with information and we're like, okay, this is reality. And then they put something in and you're like, no, it's not. Wait a minute. That's not what happened. Or like, that's not how it happened. This is how it went. And like, personally, that's influenced some of my own writing and how I've constructed like my entire fantasy world in a sense, is kind of like taking that idea of like, I'm going to make you think this thing for a second and then I'm going to change it.
I like that too. That's a good point. I'm a sucker for learning something new, and when an author promises me that there's something to learn about something, I'm kind of driven to keep reading until I find that out. Let's talk about talking about keep reading. This the pacing on this book is very fast in that the chapters are short, but the pacing of the story is actually really slow. Let's talk about that. How do you balance pacing? Or do you disagree with like, that's just the way I felt when I was reading it, is that the chapters were really fast, but the story was moving really slowly. And I think by about the 2/3 or 3/4 point, I was like, come on, let's get to the end. And I wanted to get to the end, and that just pushed me to read it more. But again, how do you balance pacing, and what do you think about the pacing? Am I wrong that it was slow and fast at the same time? Does that seem weird?
No, I agree, because I've read so many stories that feel like that, where I look back and I'm like, that was like a month in this 800-page book, but I plowed through it in X amount of time. Like I feel like I've read so many like that. So it totally makes sense. God, I don't know. Sometimes it's one of those things where I'm like, I go off vibes. Like I really do, like in my own writing, where it's like that pacing. It's like, how much do you want to explain? Or how much do you want to put in things, versus like it could be summarized real quick in a paragraph. Like, yeah, yesterday we did this and this, and now today we're on the move again. Like, how much do you want to give? And I think that's the importance of that story, is like, you want to go with the natural way that time happens in real life in terms of how things develop. Like, obviously, like war is not going to break out in, you know, where everyone's got their battle plans and their strategies and they're ready to go in like 2 days. Like, that's not going to happen. So, you know, months happen sometimes in fantasy worlds where there's battles and wars. And I think like you have to think about what you're trying to do in that story. What are you trying to explain? I think because we do jump time so much, it does kind of, it happens in a slower pace, because it's like, kind of like we said, something comes up that's related to her in a way, or something she's seen or done, and we have to go back and figure out why.
Yeah.
It's definitely a style choice for sure. Like a lot of it was probably for style itself. And I feel like books now, we have a lot of books that have those like really short chapters, like what the Tracy Wolf vampire series. I can't remember what they're called. Her chapters are like 2 pages.
Yeah.
The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, some of them can be 16 pages and some of them can be 1 or 2. Like I think but what Katie was saying, like vibes, like there's definitely a push for the vibes in a book. And I think that as authors, it's really nice to kind of have a little bit more sway with our styles than I feel like people used to be able to have, right? I feel like there's enough funky books out there that we can kind of play around in this really, really big sandbox. But it does have that fast chapter pacing, but it, like that slowness. So the story itself, that lyricalness makes it that slow, that like mellow feel, but those short chapters, like you said, Ryan, like you want it to keep going, right? And so, yeah, I feel like a lot of that would come down to style, and you see it a lot more in the like contemporary space. You see it a lot in YA. Those really short sentences, those really short chapters. YA is really, really notorious for having that kind of style. And so I think a lot of the time when you make those kinds of choices, it's based on your audience too. I switched from YA to adult for this new series. This new series is adult, and the pacing is slower because adults are more patient. They are willing to sit there and they want you to talk about your magic systems. They want you to talk about what's going on. Whereas like readers for ADDIE LARUE, they're probably going, we just want the kiss, guys. Like we want to get there as fast as we can. We're ready for it. And so like you have to decide like where your audience is, who your audience is. And you have to kind of play in that part of the sandbox. And so I feel like with this book, the style of it definitely felt very YA in that fast pacing, but you get that very lyrical, very literary style as well. And so, yeah, with this book, I feel like it's just a blend of so many things. Like we're going to talk about later, Ryan. Like it's just a huge blend of lots of different things.
Yeah. How's the pacing?
Well,
you're a YA author too, Matthew. Do you agree that the pacing is completely different for a YA and a adult book, and how do you deal with that?
I think that that's probably traditionally true. I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing. I remember books that I read as a youth, and I preferred kind of slower pacing, depending on the book. Sometimes I'd enjoyed a fast-paced one, and really just depends on the story being told. I think that you kind of nailed what you said about this one, though, where it feels both fast and slow at the same time, and that's because the chapters are so short. But for me, I think the slowness comes from that there's not really a story being told. And I'm going to bring this back to a positive. Don't worry. I'm going to say some negative stuff, but we'll bring it back to a positive again. Because there's really no conflict. There's not there's not a story conflict. There's not a plot. There's not a goal. We're not trying to achieve something. We're not trying to get somewhere. The characters aren't, we don't know what they want really in the end. And so the pacing is quick in that we see, 1 year of Addie's life go by in a few pages, if at most, a page or two, and then 20 years and then 30 years and 40 years, right? So time is jumping quickly in the past while it moves slowly in the present. But at the same time, there's not really anything happening in the overall scheme of things. Now, the positive side of that, as Allison was talking about, you got to know the rules to break them. If you've listened to any of my presentations before, I do a lot of presentations at LTUE and for Apex and other places. I actually despise the concept of writing rules. And this book is actually a prime example of why. Because if there were rules to writing, then a book like this would never succeed. It's breaking all those quote unquote rules, right? But I do believe in writing techniques. And techniques can be employed differently in different situations. And I think that that's kind of what V. Schwab here is doing. She's not using any of the traditional techniques. She's inventing her own techniques, right? This is a very experimental kind of way of telling a story. And it doesn't work for me, but clearly it does for a lot of other people. And that's the positive side, is that, like Allison brought up, these rules aren't set in stone. I prefer to think of them as techniques specifically for that reason. So you can learn the techniques and decide when to apply them and decide when to not to apply them. And that also means that you can invent your own techniques to play this game, this writing game, and your own ways of telling stories and see what works. So that's my thought there.
Yeah,
We're all actually
be
pirates.
fearless.
It's all guidelines.
It's guidelines.
Not even guidelines.
I like the what I heard from what you said was just to be fearless and to try and experiment and see how it works.
Absolutely.
So,
You know what? I do want to say one more thing because I see what you're saying. I think it was Allison who said it about YA novels being a quicker pace, but moving to adult, you can have a slower pace because adults are more patient. And I really think that's unfortunate, and I hope that that's changing in time. It may not, but I personally prefer kind of a slower pace in my storytelling because I really want to dive deep into the emotions and the thoughts of the characters rather than having everything always exploding and on fire and running and chasing and all that kind of stuff. That's all in there. And those scenes are faster paced scenes because they're action, but I think it's also important, especially for young readers who are growing and learning about themselves and the world and how other people think and feel, to really be able to dive into different characters and know that other people think this way too, or some people think very differently than I do, and that's okay too, and see different points of view on things. So I don't know. Maybe that's all hopeful dreaming, but I hope my slower paced YA novels are not reaching the wrong audience, but helping an audience used to constantly scrolling find a chance to slow down and stop and think.
one of the reasons that this is so slow is that Schwab loves to talk about the artwork and the music, and she has brought this into this as a motif to say this is kind of what the story is about creating ideas and creating art. She mentions that a couple of times, and that how art is ideas of things. It's interesting to try and write about artwork or about music, I think. But at the same time, I could kind of imagine the things that they were looking at, and I could kind of imagine the music they were listening to and whatnot. And a lot of the deals that that Luke, this character, makes, the dark, are with artists, and some she does the Men in Black thing where she picks a lot of famous people out of history and says, "Oh no, that's an alien. That's an alien. That's an alien. Not alien. Sorry, that's somebody I have a deal with. That's somebody I have a deal with. That's somebody I have a deal with."
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to do that in your own writing, and how does that go? How is it? Have you ever like glommed on? Not glom. That's a weird word. Have you ever just grabbed onto something and said, "Okay, this is going to be a big part of this book, and we're going to use this as metaphors and things like that"? And have you ever tried to do that with art before?
Not
Specifically
necessarily
with art?
Oh, go Matthew.
I was just asking a clarifying question.
Well, I guess it was two questions in there. First, it's hard to write about art, I think, and hard to write about visual things and stuff, and about audible things. But she just said, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to put these in here. We're going to talk about artists." How does it go for you when you're trying to write about those things? Let's start with that.
All right, go for it, Allison. You were saying something.
It's interesting because like we are all kind of, and Katie, I'm assuming like we all write fantasy, right? And we're kind of like not writing in this world. And so using references to things can kind of be harder because you can't go, and I was listening to the Taylor Swift album, like you can't like play on stuff in our world. And so there's definitely a balance. I will say that there is a lot of memes smuggled into one of my books. Like, so like my husband and I, I was just trolling. Like I just trolled in one of these books, and it's the Sears Assassin. And there are so many references to memes. I have the "Hello there, General Kenobi." I have the "It's an aspen tree, it's an aspen tree because of the way it is." Like I have so many of those memes in there that if you don't know them, you can't catch them. But
is that the "Nature is Neat" kid? That is that guy, isn't it? Yeah.
yes, all the Vine things, and it's like, of course, like our generation stuff, like that. All the YA kids that are reading this are gonna not get, and all
No
their moms
idea.
will read it and laugh, But there are ways that, like, as fantasy authors that are writing in otherworldly places, like you can put things in there, right? I think that Victoria V. Schwab used the art for the vibes. Like Katie was saying, like this book, like it's just a vibe book. And if you read her other stuff, like her Darker Shade of Magic fantasy series, it's not vibes. It's like a regular epic fantasy book. It is very, you have the longer chapters, you have the descriptions of the magic system, like you have character development, you have all of this crazy stuff going on, right? Like a normal fantasy book. But I think with ADDIE LARUE, it is literally just for the vibes. And so the art is part of the vibe for this book. And so when you're writing books where you want heavy vibes, you can use things in our world to bring that in. When you reference Picasso, that's a vibe. That's an instant vibe, right? When you, or if you reference like Michelangelo, they're both artists, but they're totally different kinds of artists, right? And so you can use references from our world to evoke a vibe or an emotion into your story as easily, like even easier than describing, you know, Michelangelo's David, right? Like you can go in and talk about the artistry of David's curls and the way that his veins protrude on his hands, and like you can do that. But if you just say Michelangelo's David, tons of people are going to be like, oh yeah, I know instantly what that vibe is. And so I think that there is a lot of use of our world that we can use as authors to create and evoke vibes and emotions and things. And I think that that's exactly what she did with this.
Yeah, I agree. I think like kind of like you said, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is like, how do you write about music and art is very similar. Just how do you write about any of the senses? And I think like that's what I lean on a lot is other senses when it comes to things like that. There's like two things that come to my mind that, as you know, I have a fantasy world and it's in a completely it's not in our world. It's completely different. And two of the things that I wanted to do was, one person has neon green eyes. I can't use that as a description in the book. I can use it when talking to an artist, like, hey, draw this person. They've got neon green eyes. I can't use that in my world because neon's not a thing in the time period I'm trying to adjust to it and to their world. So I have to figure out other ways, like, okay, what else is neon green that they could have? So, you know, I think the closest I came to was like chartreuse. Chartreuse green was something that I could do because they have plants at least. And that is something I could incorporate. Another thing was there's a weird thing going on in some mountains and it smells funny, like to certain people. And I imagined that smell would be like tar or like, what was it? I said like a fresh pavement, like that smell. And I was like, how else can I describe this if they don't have tar?
Yeah.
And I had to like figure out other ways to like, and that one was really, really hard. And I actually wound up talking to a friend of mine who just so happens to be like one of those reenactors specifically for Victorian era things. And they said a burning oil lamp smells very similar to tar. So when it's like right at that bottom of that, like right at the bottom of the burning oil, when there's like barely anything left, is like very similar. So I use that. But it's like applying to those senses, because I could sit there and be like, yeah, there's some weird black tendrils in a mountain all I want, but I put a smell to it. It adds just a little bit more of like, oh, this is bad. This makes you cringe. This makes you like stop for a second. And it adds just a little bit more of that emotion that you're trying to evoke from people. And I think it's the same way with like trying to put music and art into a book, where it's like, you just got to apply to the senses, because sometimes some people are not good visualizers. They can't see things in their head, but they can tap into the other senses.
That's really tricky. Yeah. I think that Schwab does a good job with telling us how the characters are reacting to the things that they're hearing, and the stuff that like that's what I get out of her writing, is that like, this is what I'm supposed to feel because this is what this person is feeling. So that kind of helps me too. I hadn't thought about trying to write in fantasy and not having words like neon. I write science fiction stuff.
I'm glad,
and so it's I don't have that problem usually.
I'm glad you're paying attention to that, because that kind of stuff pulls me out of a book when that happens. And
That's
I'm in a
why I
fantasy
pay
setting. I'm like,
attention.
really?
Yeah, I do the same thing where I try to like what was it? Someone called, I was reading a fantasy book and they called a teacup a china cup.
And you're like, oh, China exists in this world?
It's like you haven't said anything about China in this world. So
Yeah.
that pulls me, I'm the same way. Like when something's off, it really pulls me out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
suddenly
I
you're in a
know. I
world
know
where China
some readers.
exists.
Yeah,
Yeah,
suddenly, and I'm
or
like, where is it on
champagne
this map? Right.
That's a good point.
kind
Or
of
like
stuff.
I can't use deja vu
Slang.
because
Like you
again,
can't.
you can't use slang. So I'm like sitting there,
Mhm.
how the hell do I describe deja vu? Like, like
I mean,
I've been
there's
here before could be interpreted in so many different ways. Like a reader could literally think this person has been here before, but they haven't. Not really.
right.
It's
And there's
deja vu.
definitely a
So
balance to that too, because you
right.
want to use those, like deja vu is a really, really good example of one that like you can slip in there and it's just so enough so that your reader can grasp onto it and know what's happening.
Hmm.
Like if you're having a really fast-paced scene and you're like, I can't sit here and describe what's like
Right.
them
That it
feeling like
needs to
they've
be
been
like
doing
two
this before.
words. Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to be 2 words. And so there is like a fine balance between using like our world's phrases in a fantasy novel versus like creating your own world's phrases for those things. Like you have to describe those beforehand so that they understand what's happening later. Yeah, that's definitely a difficult fine line to with specifically especially like medieval fantasy where
Yeah.
they're all going my lord and you can't be like hey bro, like you can't do that.
Yeah, I mean,
like
there
like
is
yeah.
there's some leeway there because obviously the book's in English, so they're not actually speaking English, so we can assume that it's translated. So something like deja vu, as long as it's a well-known concept in their world too, there's no reason I think you couldn't use it. Neon is a different thing because that's like an actual technology, right? That's a
Yeah.
resource that you have to have the ability to actually produce that
Right. And it's like, do I
medieval
have that
societies
at
don't
this
have,
time?
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I get that one. Like that one is a great one to not, you know, oh, that would be like an anachronism almost kind of thing, right? In your fantasy setting where it's just doesn't
Yeah.
feel like it fits. But yeah, luckily my first series that I'm writing takes place in modern America, so I don't have to I don't have those problems.
Bless.
It's
Bless.
happening in modern Florida. There is, you know, but there is supernatural elements to it, except for it's kind of taking place. I don't want to get into it too much. That's not the point of this podcast, but it's taking place on like an edge of where things are starting to change, and so the characters have supernatural abilities, but it's a new thing kind of thing. But one of them has the ability to actually sense emotions in others, and so that's been really fun to play with this
Mm.
sixth sense that humans don't have, right? And how do I describe that and play with that? And what do different emotions kind of feel like or taste like or smell like kind of thing? Because those are the words that the character uses to describe them because we don't have any other words to use, right? We don't have a sixth sense vocabulary for them. And so it's interesting always trying to find ways to describe them in words that can be understood.
Yeah. Well, our hour is up. Do you guys have time for one more topic, or do we need to drop off? All right.
I'm good.
This is the last one
Got
I
a few
wanted.
more minutes.
The one I wanted to talk about for sure was that this, and Matthew said it earlier. This is a book about two people that don't know what they want, and like that is the main theme of both of their characters, that they don't know what they want, and that's how they got in this predicament that they're in. That's how they're trying to get through the book. That's why things seem like they're not moving along in an action type of way or anything. That they're still trying to figure out what they want, and they end up falling in love with each other. And in that falling in love, they one thing I appreciate is that they find out that love is not what they thought it was going to be, and that it's. I think I wish I was reading it and I could have highlighted it or something, but I was listening and I was driving my car when this scene came up. But Addie was telling Luke that she found out that love is messy and it's hard and it's, but at the same time that it's beautiful and wonderful and she wants it. And so let's talk about writing romance and writing love, and also about how well this book does for two characters that don't know what they want, what they learn as they're going along. It's kind of like the real things we learned were the friends we made along the way or something. I don't know, but that doesn't make any sense. what is it about the finding love in this story that that you appreciated, or that make this a little bit different than maybe another romance you've read?
I feel
I
like
think it felt oh, Katie, go.
we're
We
all
all
like,
have something to say.
Oh
we
my
all
God,
are
we
like-
have so many things to say.
Go ahead
I'm
and start, Katie.
I feel like I'm going to take in the route of like contemporary romance. I'm not often a contemporary romance reader. And this kind of with that like fantasy touch, but like it does kind of fall into that contemporary romance. I'm typically not that type of reader because I just feel like it's not realistic at times, or it's very overinflated. Like whatever trope they're following is just overdone. And I think that is what I loved about this was it's real. It is raw and real. And this is how it goes. This is how love actually goes. And I think setting it up, it's hard and you go through things and it's messy and it's not linear. And also the whole idea of like someone might be in it more than another. And there's also the idea of like the effort that you give in it. And I think there's the whole idea of also that like the great love might not always be the last love. And I think that was the biggest thing that drew me to it was that type of messaging was just kind of how not linear like love and romance is. And I've loved it. That was another like one of my, I think up there with my top things was how this romance went.
Awesome.
I agree, and it's actually one of the positives that I enjoyed about this book. It's something that, sorry to keep referencing my own novel, but one of the reasons why I started writing YA romance, because I never thought that's what I would write. I'm a big sci-fi reader, big fantasy reader. When I finally sat down to start writing, at the time my daughter was, becoming a teenager, and she was having troubles finding books that she could read and enjoy. And I was reading a lot of YA at the time, trying to find something as well. And I was like, most of this YA romance, and no offense to this kind of YA romance, but most of it just isn't real. Like it is people like instantly falling in love and madly in love, and things are either, things are just a little too perfect or too conveniently imperfect in just the right ways. And I thought, you know what, this isn't setting up teens for what it's actually going to be like when they get to the dating world and actually start falling in love with people that don't love them back and don't care about them, or start having the other thing happen to them, or falling in love with someone and then finding someone else that they actually like more. And then what do? Like you're with this person and now there's another person. And so that was one of the things that I tried to approach as well in my own writing to a YA audience, was to keep the romance real and to be like, look, this is not easy. This is difficult. Even when you really like people, even when you are in love with someone, it may not be, that doesn't mean that your romance or that your relationship is going to be easy or that it's going to be final. And as much as we'd all wish that every romance was a happily ever after, that's just not the reality. And so I did appreciate that about this book as well, is that, this Addie has been alive all this time, and of course she's had these difficulties getting anyone to know her, because obviously no one can get to know her, right? And so when it finally does, yeah, she's kind of smitten at first, but quickly, fairly quickly realizes that, it's not all it's cracked up to be necessarily, right? And people aren't perfect, and just because he can remember me doesn't mean I necessarily love him back. Like, I think she kind of comes to that conclusion in the end. She loves him in some sense. Not to spoil things too much. I mean, we've already said we're spoiling things, but I think kind of in the end, she realizes that she doesn't really actually love him in a romantic sense. She does care about him, right? She does love him in a person-to-person sense, in the way we love people all around us. But I think that that's that's the thing that I liked about the ending, actually, is that it treated their relationship very realistically.
They said everything. Yes, yes, all of that is correct. No, like it, like there are definitely there are lots of different sides to how you write a romance, right? And like there are so many readers that want a happily ever after, and that's not a bad thing. Like, and writers that write a happily ever after, that is not a bad thing at all. But I like there is that element of escapism with that, which readers love. Readers want to find something that is so magical and so ethereal to escape into. There is nothing wrong with that. Like, honest, like I write that. I write YA romance where, my first main characters are it's a true love at first sight thing, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But I agree that with this book, that sense of messiness and that sense of realism with love. And like how many of us grew up watching the Disney movies and being like, we are going to fall in love with somebody and it's going to be the most amazing, easy thing in the world. And how often is that true? Like I say that I have the best freaking marriage on the planet and it's still messy, right? Like there are still times where we're going to argue and we're going to cry and it's going to be hard and we're not going to communicate and all those things, right? And so I appreciate that element of realism in that. Addie and Henry didn't always get along and they had different viewpoints on things and it was messy and it was hard. And I really, really appreciate that piece of it. I think it's really important for people to know that they're not alone in their messy loves, that anybody can feel that too.
Well, thanks everybody. I appreciate all the insights, both good and bad. It's been a great discussion, and I've loved having you on here. Excited to see you guys in February, hopefully. And come check out LTUE.net. Register now for February tickets, and come and see more discussion like this one there. And check out our great authors. Their links to their web pages and stuff are in the description below, and we hope that you find more books that you enjoy in their libraries as well. So thanks a lot, and we will see everybody next month. Bye.
Thanks.